Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 6, Episode 2. We're back for another season. We're excited, as I explained last week when talking to Sanjay Dewan of Cerence. We put the show on hiatus to begin with, during the pandemic because the world put podcasts on hiatus. But now that people are listening to them again and some of those patterns are back up, we're back up and running as well. And we're excited to have two fantastic guests here today doing a lot of different things within the world of voice and AI. Ken, I'm going to start with you. Tell us who you are and tell us what you do. And you're on mute.
Great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. So here at Yobe, basically what we've done is taken a unique approach to the what we call the cocktail party problem. We use artificial intelligence to duplicate some of the features we have in the human auditory system as it relates specifically to voice. Our underlying methodology is our ability to track unique voice biometrics and other metadata that's captured in a voice signal and extract it out of noisy signals. So the byproduct of that is the ability for your voice connected devices to work properly, if you would, and more effectively with more metadata around who's talking to it, what the emotional state is, clarity of voice for things like ASR and other speech to text type apparatuses. And we see this as an interesting front end, if you would, to a lot of the value of other voice technologies in the audio path. And we're using artificial intelligence to basically help navigate through the complexity of the auditory scene in real time, as as a smart front end, if you want to call it that.
Excellent. Yeah, Ken, you're doing some cool stuff with Yobe, and we're glad to have you here and glad to see what you're doing. Thank you for being part of the show. Our other guest is Brandon Kaplan. Brandon, it's great to have you back on the show. Say hello and tell us what you do.
Thanks, Riley. Appreciate you having me, and nice to be on with you, Ken. CEO of Skilled Creative. We are a full-service conversational AI agency based in New York City. We're a team of creatives, technologists, strategists, working with Fortune 500 brands to help them figure out what is voice, what is conversational AI, how do I build a program around my business? How do I build a business out of this? How do I market? How do I do voice commerce? Kind of guiding that whole journey for people. And, we get really excited about the technology, but we like to say that we're building the most creative, the most strategic experiences in the conversational AI market. And we get to work with really cool brands every day to build those things out, and love chatting about it. So excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have both of you here. And look, there's no two sharper folks working in this, what we call the voice AI universe, than y'all. So we're grateful for you setting the time aside. We'll get right into it with the first story of the week. And hey, Siri, what happened from The Verge? So Brandon, I'm going to start with you, and then Ken, I'll go to you, and we'll alternate as we go through the stories. Siri had her, get in trouble, I guess, calling it her 10th birthday. And, as I wrote earlier this week, it was kind of bittersweet because while it indicates resilience and perseverance, it also simultaneously indicates lost opportunity. Mm-hmm. My question for you, and it'll be the same for Ken too, is first of all, in your day-to-day, who cares? Do you care about Siri? Does it ever cross your path? And then did anything else stand out in the article for you?
Yeah, I mean, really interesting article. And if you would have asked me if Siri was older or younger than 10 years old, I would have probably said much older, right? It feels like that technology has been around for a lot longer. But yeah, I mean, as much as Siri kind of drove the beginning of some of this industry, it certainly slowed and lagged behind. I don't really use it on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes on my laptop, I'll hit that button just to play around, but my phone, it's disabled. It's mostly disabled on all my devices. And where it comes up most, frankly, is clients asking about it. right? We talk so much about other conversational AI platforms, and then they say, well, what about Apple? And our response is always, if you want some Siri shortcuts, let's throw them into your program. But outside of that, it's kind of a blind spot for us. We don't really know what. There's some development tools coming out. There's some rumblings around the hardware that's coming out, but we don't do a lot in that space. Although we wish we could. We wish there were developer tools like there are from Amazon and Google and Samsung and SoundHound and all these other players. And it may be a missed opportunity, but it's also a reflection, I think, of these massive technology organizations are really strategically focused. Amazon and Google and Apple and Samsung are really driving their vision. And if it's not a top priority for their organization, they're really putting it on a back seat. So it's clear that Apple has other higher priorities that are generating more revenue and more momentum for them. And this is a nice to have, and I'm sure they're working on it. But what we've always told people is, Amazon and Google, similar to Tesla, right? They had this idea and they built this technology with this new vision. And Siri was kind of a number of old technologies that were cobbled together. And then they've been trying to build on top of it for the last, decade. Whereas the other platforms raced ahead because they were building to the kind of the newer vision of what it is. So, it's a platform we wish there was more to do in. We're keeping a close eye on it. And, the quote that I thought was really interesting from the article was just, it said, like a shepherd leading their herd off a cliff, redirecting back to their inferior apps. And I was like, what an interesting quote to pull out. And it just speaks to a little bit of that kind of like self-serving strategy that I talked about, where these organizations are driving where they want to push their products. And, they're going to drive in the direction they want, regardless of if you or I or Ken or users want it. So that's my kind of quick comments on it, but interesting article.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Ken, I'm going to ask you the same thing. With what you do with Yobe, does Siri come up at all? What is that conversation? Who cares at this point? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And did anything else stand out in the piece to you?
Yeah, and I think I'll piggyback a little off of what Brendan was saying. He's a lot closer to this from a technology than we are. We don't get a lot of queries, and I'm being tongue in cheek with this. I don't think we've ever got any queries about how we work in front of a Siri type of apparatus. It's just not something that comes up in conversation. And to Brandon's point, yeah, it'd be great to work with it. I mean, it's a big slice of the universe, right? And we're very obviously familiar with the Android environment. We love it. We know it is accessible. But there's also some development challenges on the OS platform, right? It's not straightforward for us to engage, even if we had access to some of the things that we need access to. So from that standpoint, it's always been our opinion that maybe there's a sleeping giant there. But something that jumped on the article that was really that really resonated with me was when you think about Google and Amazon. Google developed the voice platform for their core competency for search, right? Amazon developed their solution was really to help you purchase more things from Amazon Prime. It wasn't to be this new ubiquitous voice product that you see in a sci-fi movie. They just really wanted you to buy more stuff, right? If Apple had come out and say, okay, what's the core competency, and let's build voice interface around that. Like, you imagine voice interface for their OS. I mean, that's kind of like the holy grail of voice interfaces for an Apple OS. But first out the gate, you take a lot of arrows, and so. But that's the missed opportunity. I'm not gonna trying to stand behind that, but that's the missed opportunity. They could have been the first to really develop a seamless operating system with voice, and being very specific around their core competency. And that's kind of the thing I got from the article myself.
Yeah, that's great. And there's been a lot of reflection, in parallel with reflecting on Siri, reflecting on Steve Jobs passing, and just sort of thinking about what could have been, because Siri was his vision and his project. And and with him gone, as happens, priorities shift. And so you kind of left sitting there scratching your head thinking about what could have been, as both of y'all sort of discussed. Story number 2 from Ars Technica: Amazon gives Alexa some more patience. So this is interesting. And Ken, I'm going to start with you on this, and Brandon, I'll go to you. So this article talks about how Amazon gives people longer time to respond, which has some accessibility use to it. And then it talks also about typing. You can type answers to it. We've seen a lot from Amazon in the last 30 days. They had a big event. They've been kind of banging the drum. What do you take away from this article, and where do you see the Alexa ecosystem right now?
Yeah, so I have a number of the devices, as you would assume. I have almost every platform out there. And being the business we in, I think every one of us owns every platform that has a voice, just so we know how they interface. This update was noticeable, like very noticeable, from the lag time it takes between the time I say the wake word and you get the command. And so I'm just like, we all push out our first version of something, and there's some glitches to it, or not glitches, but there's some user feedback that you need to have. And it was demonstratively noticeable for me. Just this morning, it was noticeable, the lag between the wake word and the command. And that's what I'm assuming they're giving that extra gate to get more snippets and push that back, and then decide when you're not talking. But from a flow standpoint, and I'm from New England, we talk faster than most. I like my response to be kind of quick. This extra time didn't add stickiness to my experience at this point. And now they'll probably tweak and figure out, what the sweet spot is. But I do see Amazon putting a lot of effort, right, in trying to make that interface a little bit more seamless for a wider range of demographics, right? That instead of just, okay, yes, we have how many billion of users. Now let's go for some of those outliers and make the system a little bit more engaging for those individuals. Just for me, because we're always chasing at Yobe. We're chasing that seamless interface. One of the challenges that I think the whole voice industry has is that there is a standard for operating that no one's really talked about, which is what we call the human standard. We've been talking to people for millennia. We know how the interface is supposed to work. So after the novelty wears off, right, now you're stuck with, I kind of want it to work the way I normally communicate using language. And I think that's what a lot of platforms we're chasing, that symbiotic type of relationship between voice. And I just, the jury's out what happens after the next iteration of this. But right now, that seamless type of connectivity right now with my Amazon device just isn't there. It just took longer. It doesn't hear you with the music, because now, of course, you got to change the modeling from the noise cancellation standpoint. There's a lot of things that went into what I think it feels, and how it feels a little bit less seamless. But Amazon's chasing the same goal that I think we all are, is how do we make these things more symbiotic with more people as we scale out to basically grow our base. So.
Yeah, that's interesting that you sort of observed that in the wild, and it sort of struck you as maybe a transitional sort of thing. Yeah, that's really interesting. Brandon, same question for you. Your thoughts on Alexa continuing to make changes like this to the ecosystem, and then in combination with some of the other stuff they've done over the last 30 days. You're close to those folks.
Mm-hmm.
You operate in that ecosystem quite a bit. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think really Ken's kind of perspective is really interesting on like looking at the inverse of the bugginess that a new push can create. So that's really fascinating. I haven't noticed that, but I'll check it out today. And I think Amazon's really emerged in the last 12 to 18 months as the platform that is still really, really committed from a true like voice assistant perspective to just unleashing the candy shop at us of just like constantly putting out new products. And they've got dozens and dozens of small teams of people that are working on products that are known or unknown or in the works. And it's exciting to see them doing it. Talking about the latency, it's interesting, you know, because there's points in conversational design where you need to think about, where do I need to speed up? And then where do I need to slow down? And I think it's interesting to think about, you know, we take a lot of time when we're producing experiences to make sure we're clipping audio perfectly, so we don't create that awkward latency, so that the human brain goes like, wait, what's going on? This doesn't feel right. We want it to feel good. But then there's also moments where we'll use SSML markup to slow things down, so that we give people pause and we give people time and we give them the ability to kind of process a menu or process something. So I think Amazon's intention on this listening for longer periods of time is phenomenal for disabled communities, for sure. I also think it's just good for everybody if they can get it right, because you know, I've got my laptop on a cooling pad. If I showed you the tabs that are open on my computer, you would judge me harshly for the number of tabs I have open. And I think that like everybody right now has a lot of tabs open in our brain, and you're just like working on 5 things and you're talking to Alexa and you just can't remember what you started the question about, and it takes our CPU a little bit longer to process. So if Alexa can listen for a little longer, I think it's a great thing. So that's like a fun widget. We'll see what happens. The thing that I think is a little more compelling is that they're adding text, which is something that Google has been doing for years. And it was very Google of Google to do that, but it's very different of Amazon to do that from where they've been pushing the platform. And I think it's an interesting indicator of potentially, you know, maybe some more enterprise application focus, or maybe some more utility focus, or hyper awareness of privacy concerns and people typing passwords versus saying PIN codes. And so it's just an interesting evolution for the platform. And I'm excited. As the kids say, I like that energy from Amazon for putting out new features, you know.
Yeah, and 2 interesting perspectives on that. And it's just really great. You know, the one thing you can say about Amazon is they are unafraid to experiment.
Yeah.
And that's been consistent from the start of Alexa. In fact, it is Alexa. Alexa was an experiment to begin with, and all they've done is just continue to build and build and build and tinker. And every time this comes up, I think about the Echo buttons, and it's like they knew when they released that, a couple of years ago, that might have like a little bit of utility to somebody, but just the act of putting it out just signals all the right things. And there's been countless other examples, but that one sticks out. So yeah, no, great summary and great analysis there. Story number 3 from Yahoo Finance: conversational AI market to reach 32.62 billion globally by 2030, from Allied Market Research. So here we are again with one of these sort of reports, right? We've seen a number of these sort of talk about the growth. We all sort of feel it intrinsically, every day we're feeling the growth of what's going on. But it's interesting to see it when it's put into words, and see it when it's written down and discussed. And Brandon, I'm going to start with you. Your thoughts on this? Any surprise? What does this mean to you?
It means good. It means good things, right? Our assessment is actually that the market is larger already. We assess the market's closer to around 10 billion when we start piecing together different elements of the industry, and you look at the consumer facing side, the enterprise side, closer to or just north of 10 billion. So, but I'm excited to see that there's this continued momentum and growth. And, everyone on this call, everyone on this podcast has invested our lives, our businesses, our teams into conversational AI. And I think for everyone, we're in that like innovation hype cycle. There was a lot of hype 2 years ago. We went into like the trough of disillusionment the last like 14 months during the pandemic. And now we're kind of back into that. I think it's like productivity growth phase. So I love to see all the investment in the space. I love to see the forecasts continuing to grow. There's a lot going on, but what I find really fascinating is that we're not just talking about Alexa anymore. We're talking about the size of the market, and as it relates to consumer facing experiences, commerce, customer service, transcriptions, companies like Ken's, you see the market maturing, and the folks that were very impatient have kind of like moved on, and now they're doing NFTs or who knows what they're doing, right? And the people that truly believe in conversational AI are going, okay, like let's go. Now the really cool stuff has emerged, it's maturing, let's start building the really impactful stuff. So, we're excited to see the growth. We're excited to see people reporting on the growth. I always tell our clients, be skeptical of a Forrester report or there's a lot of good diligence that goes into that, but any forward momentum is excites me. So I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. And Ken, I want to ask you the same question. Here's another one of these stats, eye-popping numbers. We've sort of gotten used to it, but it's interesting to see maybe not everybody has. What is your reaction to a report like this? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of Brandon's thesis that I think it's larger than was assessed, and that could be a little of we're drinking our own Kool-Aid a little, right? But at a high level, it's I see a interesting bottleneck right now around how the consumer engages with conversational AI. And once we take care of some of those barriers of entry, what's the real trajectory look like? So for us, we've been focused a lot of our energy on making it so the acoustic environment for mobile devices is manageable for these type of solutions to work effectively. So what happens when you have the ability to use your cell phone in a conversational AI type of environment, right, where you're talking seamlessly to it? And what does that give brands the opportunity to do that might be sitting on that cell phone? And I don't think those numbers really calculate what happens when conversational AI can be distributed through these other devices that right now are barriers of entry because of certain situations like, I don't know what the acoustic environment is like, so getting good ASR in that environment is difficult. It has been our thesis that as we add on to more data, get more metadata from the voice, how does that influence the stickiness of conversational AI, right? So versus just getting a speech to text type of relationship, what happens when I know it's Bradley talking to me because you're using some kind of biometric filter to let them know who the user is? What happens when I have some high level categorization of Bradley's emotions? What happens when I know what environment you're in, right? These are things that from a human standpoint, back to, I guess, our work here is making sure that we try to get as much metadata out of the voice as possible. When you add some of that context and some of that richness to the information you're giving conversational AI platforms, it's more engaging, it's stickier. We're seeing this interesting, I guess, renaissance of conversations around advertising. What happens when you make advertising conversational? So it's suggestive, it's not abrasive. And that's what voice allows you to do. It allows you to give me a suggestion about something in a very humanistic way. And instead of clicking through, I speak through, I was like, yeah, I want to know more about XYZ. And there you go. You have conversation, some conversation AI platforms, the advertisers are happy, the brands are happy, and the user doesn't feel this arduousness of the way traditionally we've moved away from, our the 1940s radio commercial, right? And we've moved to this more obtrusive visual type of interjection into my conversation. So I think the numbers are a little low. I think that, there's a little bit more upside here, and that might be because we're in the trenches and we see where the barriers are. But when you remove the barriers and you have more adoption, I think it becomes a slightly larger market than the number that was even projected, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting that both of y'all immediately go to it's larger. Yeah, I mean, it probably is larger. I immediately suspect I guess it's my nature to suspect the way that data like this is counted to begin with, and I just immediately assume stuff was left out. And in this situation, yeah, it probably was. But it's still a good news story, and so it's interesting to hear you all talk about that, and I appreciate that. Story number 4, and we're continuing our tradition here of trying to end each show with something a little bit different. Typically I look for something bizarre, but I couldn't find it this week, so I settled for something uplifting. At least I think it's uplifting. AI is still awesome 20 years later, from a website called Cult of Whatever. And so what this story does, it's a long piece, but basically it recounts a number of takes, cinematic Hollywood takes on AI. And I'm interested to hear, and Ken, I'm going to start with you, and then Brandon, I'll go to you. I'm interested to hear how this story struck you. I'll just tell you that I'm on social media more than probably anybody should be, which is how much people should be is probably 0. But I'm on there quite a bit, and I see there's a lot of people talk about AI. There's people working with it, and then there's a different subset of academics that rail against it. And then you have just normal people that will mention it casually from time to time. And my question for you is, one, what stood out, if anything in particular, from this kind of fun recap type of piece? And 2, how would you characterize the evolution and how we view AI now that it's starting to become a little bit more real?
Yeah, and so I'll start with, I think to a certain degree, a lot of us are sci-fi junkies, right? And so when I'm thinking about the voice user interface, I can go back, I might be dating myself, but I can go back to watching reruns of the original Star Trek. And it always amazed me, how did the Enterprise know that was Captain Kirk giving the struck sequence? It could have been anybody saying it, right? Like the first instance of biometrics and voice identification, auto destruct sequence, right? And so I love to see, we talk about different movies, of course, we can go back to 2000, 2001, and all these other movies around artificial intelligence. It does help me basically frame the conversation that we have here internally, which is there's been a division of machine learning based artificial intelligence and the inferencing intelligent artificial intelligence we've come to think of when we think of Skynet, right? And they're not the same, right? And so I think that the machine learning, data-driven, pattern recognition way of thinking about AI is now dominant. And we know this because that's kind of what the train is on right now. And that real, inferencing, decision-making, kind of ambiguous AI is not getting the same line share of research attention as what the machine learning has. And I think some of the criticisms that you mentioned, Bradley, are coming from, well, how is the data used to create some of the models that now influence a lot of our lives? If you watched any of the Facebook conversation, that's kind of how it kind of mushrooms out to the public face, right? And so it's getting a lot of attention, and it gets some pushback because of the core modeling part of it, the data part. What do you put in dictates what you get out. And so, it's what I got from the article is, we would love to see a little more, line share of the focus going back to that inferencing, no data, computational discovery type of way of looking at artificial intelligence, the true nugget of artificial intelligence, because I think that there's some art there that's been passed over, going towards the big data. And for us, we don't do any data. All of our stuff is, inferencing AI on the edge. And we see the benefits there going into more computationally light environments, because we don't need neural nets to do a lot of our thinking for us. We're doing it on the edge. So, first thing I got was this bifurcation of data-driven AI, and then what we call more the inferencing intelligence AI.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point of view on that. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Brandon. I'm gonna give you the last word here. Your thoughts on the piece, and do we still romanticize AI? Has our view changed on it? Give me your thoughts.
I thought it was a cool piece. I liked it. I think, thinking about, this piece where it was talking about the movie and all the different movies, right, that have been out there around AI. And I was reflecting how ultimately in every movie that you've got like Ex Machina, you have AI, you have all these other movies, the AI always comes for us, right? Like at the end of the day, the AI always comes for society because it sees some flaw in us, and it wants to eliminate that flaw, and it comes for us. And for me, there's like this interesting, deep rooted, I don't know, there's like this weird subconscious fear that people have of things they think can replace them. You see that in all different, parts of life. And I've always been really positive about emerging technology and AI. And when our company was focused on broader technologies, we used to be focused on all emerging tech. I would do talks about how we've always had people afraid of emerging tech. The word Luddite is a very, very old word. It's not, didn't come around because of AI. It came around because of like looms and printing presses. And people thought that the printing press was going to destroy society. But my viewpoint is, and this is shared from like just reading about this for, a long time, is we as humans end up offloading our consciousness to our tools, right? So when you get your pencil, you're offloading speaking words to writing words. When you get your computer, you're offloading pulling a book out to typing in a URL. When you get your Alexa device, you're offloading going to your computer and thinking about things to just coming back to saying it, which brings us back full circle. And there's this narrative, it's an anecdote about, this is years old, but they had an AI looking at images looking for cancer cells. And I think that the AI was something like 92% accurate in isolating cancer cells. And then they had a doctor doing the same thing, and that doctor was like 95% accurate. So like, good news, AI can't replace us yet. The doctor was better than the AI. But when they combined the AI with the doctor, it was like 99% accurate, right? So instead of thinking about AI replacing us, if we can think about AI as a teammate of ours, then how much faster can we move and how much better can we be? And sure, there's these like unknown concerns about how smart does it get and what does it do, but there's probably a far greater amount of good that will happen in the short and midterm than some like matrixy world in the future. So I got excited kind of like looking at all these different films and reflecting on how there's always this like negative lens. And you look at something like GPT-3 and like think about that as a tool Kickstarter for us jumping ahead and getting code bases or answers. And I was excited kind of thinking about it. And I also was reflecting on the fact, I didn't realize this, but it was a Stanley Kubrick film originally before it got handed over to Steven Spielberg. And then we're thinking about the Steve Jobs with Siri. And it's like that film and that reflection on AI would have been very different if Kubrick had brought it to life, similar to how Siri might be very different if Steve Jobs had brought it all the way through. So my gut reaction is, let's not fear it. Let's be aware of it. Let's keep eye on it. Let's design it in a strategic way. But there's so much good that we can get out of this technology, and it's being shown every day. So again, all good stuff.
No, that's great. That's great. So yeah, great analysis all the way around. And look, appreciate both of y'all setting the time aside. Ken Sutton of Yobe, Brandon Kaplan, the Skilled Creative. Thanks both of y'all for being part of This Week in Voice with us.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bradley. Thank you.
You got it. So for This Week in Voice, Season 6, Episode 2, thank you for watching. If you're on YouTube, thank you for listening. If you're on your podcast provider of choice, until next time.